How much time do you spend on TikTok every day? Hi friends and readers, another week, another reading vlog, and this week in particular we have a little bit of a challenge for ourselves, and I would even go as far as to say this was also a challenge for me last week in preparation for this week. I do work a full-time job, 40 hours a week, and reading is also a hobby of mine, so I try to supplement my day with reading instead of picking up my phone. But I am human, I have my weaknesses, and one of those weaknesses is probably a weakness you have, or maybe you're stronger than I am, and that is TikTok. I will not lie, I spend a fair amount of my time on TikTok, but I also spend a fair amount of my time reading. So we're going back to last week, Monday through Friday, which would have been a work week for me, and we're gonna look at our screen time and see how many minutes I spent on TikTok every day. And my goal is for that same day this week to read that amount of minutes in pages. And we're focusing specifically on TikTok because that is the social media poison for me. That's where I doom scroll, and if I'm gonna spend time on my phone, that's usually where I'm spending my time. Really, I wanted to try to have a fun way to read, stay curious this week, but with a little twist on it. Last week, while it was a work week, I did spend some time on TikTok, but I will be transparent that I was preparing myself for this week's video. So maybe I would spend more time on TikTok than I did last week in a normal week, but that was kind of the whole point for me, was to not only focus this week on reading, but also last week to get me off my phone, because I knew I'd be spending however long then this week reading. And I did also do a reading vlog last week, and last week I was fostering a puppy. Those should definitely impact my TikTok time. I think it's going to be doable. I did take a glance at what the week's gonna look like for me, and there's one day that I'm a little nervous about. So maybe this week I try to hit the same amount of pages and minutes, but also more than that. Really, that's my goal. Is I know I'm gonna be able to supplement the time, but I also, even if I make those many pages or read those many pages, I don't want to go to my phone after that either, which means we're starting out strong. Monday of last week was Monday, August 10th. My TikTok minutes were 54 minutes. So I spent almost an hour on TikTok, which means today, Monday, August 17th, I need to read 54 pages. I can do that. We've made it to Tuesday. I'm still feeling a little sick and quite stuffy, and I started my period today, so it's been a fun last few days. But on the brighter side of things, I did complete Monday, and we had, as a reminder, 54 minutes. Yes, 54 minutes on TikTok Monday of last week, and I read a total of 80 pages. So we completed Monday plus some, which I'm really happy about. I got to read in some of the clips you saw yesterday, but I also read a lot last night before bed. That helped me surpass the goal for Monday. I read to page 108 of the book I'm currently in, and I had already read one chapter of this book a few days ago, so it was a total of 80 pages for yesterday. And now we are into Tuesday. It is 12:03. I just started my lunch break. I am working from home today, so we're halfway through the workday. And the book that I'm reading this week is The Shampoo Effect. I don't know if I've said that or not. This is by Jenny Jackson, and you can see on the front of this book that Jenny Jackson is the New York Times bestselling author of Pineapple Street. Now for Pineapple Street, I actually have not read that book. I have seen that book. I remember seeing it a few years ago in the bookish world, but I never picked it up. It just never made its way onto my digital TBR. If you've read that book, please let me know if I should read it. A lot of times that I discover newer books in the bookish world and pick them up, it's usually a second or third book of an author who had a popular book at one point, and then I try to decide if I liked it enough to go back to their backlog. I actually don't know if this is their second book or if Pineapple Street was not their debut. I'd have to check that out to see. Maybe it tells me in the front of this book. No, it says also by this author, just Pineapple Street, so I think that this is their second book. Depending on how we feel in the later half of this book, which we have about that much left, maybe we'll add it to the TBR. I always recently, with physical books, have been trying to read a little bit about the the author, Jenny Jackson, was a graduate of Williams College and the Columbia Publishing course. They are a vice president and editorial director of fiction at Alfred A. Knopf, raised in Massachusetts and lives in Brooklyn Heights with their family. But let's talk about The Shampoo Effect. I actually bought this book. It's the last book left on my physical TBR from the last few weeks. I really don't keep a physical TBR. These are all of my books on these two shelves, or these two bookshelves units over here, and this is a big upgrade for me that we recently purchased last month. So for physical TBR, I try not to buy books until I'm ready to read them, and often if I'm buying a book, it's because it's a new release and it's not at my library yet, and I can't easily get it on eLibby or Kindle Unlimited since I pay for that. And that was the case with this book because it just came out in June of 2026. It's now early August. When I bought this, I bought it in the beginning of July. I went on a cruise and I was at the airport, and I've been trying to, when traveling, find a book and purchase it so I can have that memory of that trip associated with that book. I never got to read it while I was on that vacation, and I've held on to it for about a month now, so I'm really excited to actually be reading it. I really haven't looked into much about books that have the book clubs on the cover of them. Like this says read with Jenna. I don't know how books are selected. I'm imagining it's selected by Jenna, which I think this is formerly Jenna Bush, maybe a different last name now, a talk show host. I read a book last week with the same thing on it. I really should look that up. I know there's like Oprah and there's Reese and also Jenna. Those are the three that are coming to my mind. This book falls under the fiction category, probably contemporary fiction, maybe women's fiction as well. And when I've seen other people recommend The Shampoo Effect, it's because they've said it'd be a great beach read or a summer read. And 100 pages in, I can imagine why, especially when you see the cover of it. It does scream beach read. Right now, the setting and the atmosphere, there's a little bit of beach involved, but it's not overtly everything in the book. I've also heard that the book is very funny and very relatable. On the back, you've got Rex by Ellen Hildebrand and Coco Mellers. And I actually read a Coco Mellers book last week, Blue Sisters, and that was the one that I read that was a read with Jenna as well. I think it also hits the sweet spot at a total of 338 pages. Fiction is my genre these days, and books between 300 and 400 pages are my groove. I'm gonna hold off on sharing what this book is even about. I want to read a little bit more to get a better understanding of our characters. Right now, we are following some perspectives of, so far, 4 different characters. Caroline, Bailey, Fran, and Augusta, all of which are women. I'm excited to learn more about these characters, what's going on in this kind of juicy friendship, maybe not so much a friendship world, but so far, all of these characters are very relatable. I just want to learn a little bit more before I tell you what The Shampoo Effect is about. Let's Tackle Tuesday is going to be, okay, doable, 56 minutes, which would be 56 pages. Only 2 more than I had to do yesterday. This is very accomplishable on a Tuesday. Let's catch up tomorrow. Finally halfway through the work week. It's Wednesday at 12:04 and I am on my lunch break. Yesterday being Tuesday, of course, I read a little bit on my lunch break and I read a good bit after work yesterday. So we're gonna get our final totals for reading on a Tuesday. Let me do some calculations. All right, so I finished at page 213 in my book. I am now, I think, down to 120 something pages, which maybe I'll finish today, depending on what I did on TikTok this time last week. So definitely over halfway, and I finished at 213. So let's calculate. We read 104 pages on Tuesday out of a goal of 56. So we definitely surpassed Tuesday's goal. And honestly, I really attribute reading way more than I have to for this challenge to this book. I took off the dust cover. The Shampoo Effect we're still reading. This book has been very bingeable. I found myself just flying through the pages, and honestly in the format that it's set up, which is every chapter follows a different woman in this town and in this story as a part of this big friendship dynamic, which we'll dive into a little bit now. And because of that, you'll have one one chapter about Caroline, which is, I believe, who we opened the book up with, and you'll learn about Caroline and her perspective and all of this dynamic that's happening. And then you'll go to Augusta's and something crazy will happen by the end of their chapter, and it might be 3 chapters before you come back to that. So it's really a good page turner, and learning about these women, they have been so funny and so relatable, which is why I've wanted to keep reading. I think I've mentioned that this book was based out of Massachusetts, or maybe I didn't. So I can definitely see the nods to it being a beach read. A lot of the settings is them at the beach, but definitely a summer vibe, summer atmosphere. Let's learn a little bit about this book and the characters. First, we have Caroline. Caroline is not from this town, but she actually moves to this town as a part of, I don't know if it's considered a job, but she's going there to develop her career, and that is in the writing world. And in this small little town, of course, she runs into Van, and Van is our point of connection to the rest of the women that we learn about in this book, because Van has an ex-girlfriend in this small town, and it's one of those girlfriends where they kind of were never serious, but you always knew of Van and Bailey. So Bailey is one of the other women we are following. And so when Caroline comes to this small town, starts up a friendship with Van, and things begin to progress from there, we learn how she was not so welcomed into the friendship that was Van's friends, Bailey, Augusta, and Fran. And I love what we're exploring through each of those characters. Caroline's whole thing has really been in coordination with Van, whereas the other women, we learn a little bit more about them beyond their husbands. Bailey is just dating, and she really is free-spirited, doesn't necessarily need a man to move on with her life and to live her life. And then we have Augusta, who is a bit snobby, and she has a husband, and I do think she also has kids, but she's quite frankly a little bit of an unlikable character, and she's a little bit mean to Caroline. And then we also have Fran. Fran I can see myself most in, and Fran has also a long-term partner who you would consider to be her husband, but she's kind of got the vibes of, I don't need to marry a man to have a partner. And really, we are uncovering, which I did just check, it is in the summary, that of the 4 girls, we have Caroline kind of out here. They are putting her to the side, and that is because our character Bailey, Van's ex-girlfriend, finds out she's pregnant with Van's baby, and they haven't dated in a few months. And so once she found out she was pregnant, Van was already dating Caroline. You can imagine how people might treat what they're seeing on the outside looking in, or on the inside looking out, that Caroline is the other woman to them, because they've known Bailey their whole lives, whereas Caroline's his new girlfriend who just kind of walked into the picture at an untimely moment. We've been really exploring the characters up until this point. We've been exploring this town. They are out and about. These people are doing things. They seem like a fun group of adults, honestly, but I don't know what could happen in this last bit of the book, because it's sort of character driven in a way that I don't know where the plot's headed. I don't know if there's a story that I just haven't thought about yet. There's definitely some things about our character Augusta and her relationship with her brother and her husband that I think there's left to uncover. So I'm wondering if the next bit of the book is going to get toxic, and if we're going to uncover a lot of bad secrets about these people and who they really are. Let's keep reading to find out. And our total for Wednesday is actually really the least amount of time I spent on TikTok so far this time last week. We were on TikTok for a total of 39 minutes last Wednesday. So today I only have to read 39 pages. But if I'm being real, this challenge is kind of obsolete because I want to finish this book, I think. Good morning. It is actually Thursday morning at 6:41 a.m. I do work in person today, which is Thursday, and in person tomorrow, which is Friday. Now, with it being 6:40, I'm normally gone by now. I usually have to get out of the house by 6:30 every morning that I work in person because I have quite a commute. But today I actually have a doctor's appointment before heading into the office, so I get to leave a tad later than I normally have to, hence bringing you updates at this current moment, first thing in the morning. Good morning. Now, my totals for Wednesday are very good. In fact, a little too good. I'm taking a look at what I need to read today, which is Thursday, while working in person / after working in person. And I wish I would have had yesterday's reading day today. If you'll remember, for Wednesday, I only needed to read 39 pages because I only had 39 minutes on TikTok last week. Well, I ended up finishing the day with 138 pages. Most of those pages come from me finishing The Shampoo Effect, which I wanted to do and did. And then I also read the first 2 chapters of a new book on my Kindle last night. I don't know what came over me. I read outside in my not outside. I read in the living room last night for hours to finish that book, and then I went to bed. And normally I need a little bit of a book to put me to sleep, so I started the next one on my Kindle, and here we are. So we have tackled and completed Wednesday like out of the park. Let me give my final thoughts on The Shampoo Effect that I finished last night. I feel like I'm bouncing around everywhere. Had some notes on my phone down here. First off, the author, I wanted to talk about the meaning of the title, The Shampoo Effect, because it really almost feels like it has nothing to do with these characters, this town, these people, and then you read a quick little blurb here and there about what they want to describe to you as the shampoo effect. Essentially, our characters are actually talking about the shampoo effect in certain scenarios. And I dog-eared the first time it popped up because I'll be honest, I didn't quite understand what it meant. It says, back in high school, when they all started drinking and going out, they became obsessed with the shampoo effect. When they had a big night of partying and followed it with beer the next morning, they would get drunk again in an instant, the way a second squirt of shampoo in the shower produced outside suds. I think essentially it's literally a comparison to what shampoo does when you wash your hair twice. Like for me, I wash my hair once and it gets like no suds in it. I feel like it's barely washing the oil out of my hair, and then immediately I go back in with another squirt of shampoo and it's so sudsy. There's foam and bubbles all over my hair. In this book, it's the context of being around these people your whole life. That's the first squeeze of shampoo. And then the second that they do something else that you've seen before, you've heard before, it's been done before, it has such a much bigger effect because it's repeated. It's happened. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading that all wrong. I will say it was a little bit confusing. This book, through these characters, really explores women, pregnancy, being a wife, being a partner, being a mom. I would certainly put this in the women's fiction category. And I told you I didn't know what was gonna happen in the end, and it did in fact get messy, but I really enjoyed it. I thought the very ending, the epilogue, chef's kiss, I really liked the ending. This is a 4-star book for me. And after reading it, I did in fact go and put Pineapple Street on my TBR. And now we'll quickly, because I have got to get out the door, talk about Thursday of last week. Last Thursday, I thought I did pretty good at not being on my phone and not getting on TikTok, but then I remembered that our power went out last Thursday. That was the day that we had people come and look and meet our foster dog too, so I really thought I hadn't been on TikTok that much. Then I remembered that when the power went out, I kind of just doom scrolled on my phone, which resulted in being on TikTok for a total of 2 hours and 1 minute. Yep, you heard it. By far the most amount of time I spent on TikTok during the work week last week. So today, Thursday, we have to read 121 pages. The day I go to work, and yesterday I read more than that. Let's do it. I can do it. I'm gonna lock in on my lunch break today, and after work today, we're gonna read 121 pages. And I get to dive back in. I'm only on chapter 2 of the next book of this reading vlog. This has been a book that I have so highly anticipated picking up. I am finally starting another hockey romance series, and that's going to be the DC Star series, starting with book number 1, Face Off by Chelsea Curto. Good morning. We are back for another update. Yesterday was Thursday. I worked in person and I'm rushing because I need to be out of the door in 3 minutes to drive to work today. I read on my lunch break at work yesterday, and then I got in bed and read for hours last night. I haven't read on my Kindle in so long, so it was so nice to prop up my Kindle stand and my little clicker and just be hands-free in my bed reading as much as I wanted to last night with some motivation, of course. worse. I didn't even check on the page count and I just fell asleep like this under the covers. Woke up this morning, my Kindle was still floating above my face and I just checked to see how many pages I read. I had no clue, and luckily I think we passed Thursday's total minutes that needed to be converted to pages. Some math, I went to page 143 and the day before I had, 142. And the day before I had only read 14 pages of that book, which means we read a total of 128 pages on Thursday out of a goal of 121. I'm so excited. We are 4 for 4 on replacing our TikTok time with reading. And even better, I know for a fact yesterday with being at work all day, coming home, going for a walk, reading, I didn't get on TikTok one time yesterday. And I was on it the most that time last week. So I'm super proud of myself. Very glad I did that. And we're down to 2 minutes before I need to get in my car and drive to work on Friday. Thank goodness it is Friday. Good news, last Friday I must have been really busy as well. I was only on TikTok last Friday for 18 minutes. Screenshot to show you those 18 minutes, which means 18 pages is nothing. I do have a busy day, but I hope that I get to read more than 18 pages. And I'll also come back to catch you up. I read 140 something pages so far in a new book that I haven't updated you about, and that was Face Off by Chelsea Curto. I don't have time to update you on that book, but I'll talk to you about it tomorrow. 6:29, one more minute. I'm gonna go get in my car and drive to work. I've officially made it to Saturday. It is Saturday at like 4:30 p.m. I'm just now remembering that I needed to give you the last update of reading based off of how much time I spent on TikTok last week for yesterday, which was Friday. I think that I worked yesterday, I know I worked yesterday in person. I did read a little bit on my lunch break, which is probably the clips you've seen. And then I tried reading a little bit last night and fell asleep immediately in the middle of a chapter. I am reading Face Off by Chelsea Curto and I'm at page 194, which is 45% of the way through this book. I read a total of 51 pages yesterday, so we did meet our goal. Last week on TikTok I spent 18 minutes, which thank goodness, because I didn't read very much Friday. Fridays tend to be a little busy for me reading wise. I don't get much reading done because I'm running a lot of errands and finishing out the week so I can have a little bit of a more restful weekend. But nonetheless, we did read the amount we needed to based off of that time on TikTok. We did meet our goal, but it was the least amount that I read all week, which makes sense for my reading pace and what I had going on this week. We are reading a book by Chelsea Curto. If you've ever heard of this author, you may have seen that they just put out a book, I think within the last month or so, their new release, something having to do with stormy weather. I'll probably throw that up on the screen. My coworker didn't quite enjoy it, even though my coworkers were the ones who recommended me the book I'm reading this week. They said that the new release wasn't their favorite. Have you read it? Have you heard anything about this new release? And aside from the series that I've just started this week, I'm not sure if this author has other series. From a quick glance, it looks like they might, maybe like romance, Christmas holiday or Christmas romance books. And I'm wondering if they have a spin-off series. This is a hockey romance series and I'm wondering if they have any spin-offs because I've already heard of characters in different sports in this book, so I wonder if they have series. I've been trying to read the author blurb just to learn a little bit more about the authors that I'm reading, especially the first time I read one of their books, which this is the first one I've read of this author. It says they are a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of romance novels that highlight strong women and men obsessed with them. She loves spending her time between the Northeast and Florida while daydreaming about what book she's going to write next. So diving into the series that I am reading, it's called the DC Star series, I'm pretty sure. And DC because, are they in Washington, DC? Nonetheless, this is a hockey romance series, and I do think that for the most part, all of these books are on Kindle Unlimited. And I say all of these books, and that's because it's a pretty long series already. It is up to book number 5 completely being out. Book number 6 actually comes out in August of this year, and then even book number 7 already has an announcement for November of this year. year. I don't know if it has since been picked up and won't be on Kindle Unlimited with the new releases, but fingers crossed, because I really enjoy when I can find a series that I can solely read on Kindle Unlimited. It really makes me feel like I'm getting all of my subscription and all of my money's worth. I mentioned that my coworkers recommended this series. They said that books, I think 2 and 3 are some of their favorites, and I think that with these series, it tends to happen that the later books become more favorites because of the found family that you build across this interconnected standalone series. I also follow someone on BookTube, Emmy Rossum, if you've heard of them, and I've seen them read this series and really enjoy it. So I put it on my TBR, my digital TBR, months and months back, and I'm just now getting around to it. I had finally finished up all of these series or sports romance series I had been in the middle of, and I thought it was time I could finally dive into another one. Now, this book in particular, Face Off, is a total of 423 pages, so it's a little bit longer, but not too long. The chapters are pretty short, feels very bingeable if you're in the mood for a book like this one, sports romance, where it's really just romance with a side of sports. Except for this one feels a little bit more of the sports that I'm used to, and that's because both of our main characters are on the hockey team. Yes, our main character, Emmy, is the first woman ever in the NHL. She gets picked up by this hockey team, where our other main character, Maverick, plays as the captain. And you can imagine he's sort of this classic persona where everyone thinks that he is this man that has no roots, he dates whoever he wants to, never settles down, and of course people assume him to be a little bit of a jerk. Meet the newest woman on the team, the first woman on the team, and in the organization and in the league. So we're already really diving into things about women in sports, especially women in sports that are dominated by men. Sad news is I am approaching halfway through this book, but you're not gonna know my final thoughts on it because this video ends here. I was just doing my work week, Monday through Friday. I hope I can finish this book this weekend. I probably will. I just want to kind of sit down and relax for the rest of the weekend. Feels like one of those books where it'll end up being a 3, in between a 3 and a 4 stars. I'm having a good time. It's quite relaxing to sit down with my Kindle. It's just not one of those books that are a 5-star feeling. That might change as we progress through the series. We get to know all of these characters that come back up in each other's lives on this team, their friendships, and build a family. All right, I think that's it. Maybe one day I'll do one and where instead of just picking an app like TikTok, I pick all of my social media time and convert that to pages. I am a little scared of that though. That's all. Bye for now.